Welcome, welcome. And I want to say today is World Suicide Prevention Day. And this topic is close to me because I did lose a family member to suicide, as well as I've been very close to it myself a few times because of dissociation and having one part of me witnessing and observing another part of me in the act of getting close to ending my own life. So the part that was watching didn't want that to happen, and then there was another part that was enacting that was getting closer and closer to it happening, and this other part of me felt very helpless. And yeah, somebody close to me did end their life, and I've had experiences and feelings where I didn't want my life to go on, but then it passes and it gets to a place again where I enjoy living my life. So I just want to say, keep going and keep trying. You never know when you'll get to a place where you really feel like you just want to live forever. And another thing that's been happening recently is that I feel kind of conflicted about what's going on in my life and in the world. And I talked about with myself before how I wanted to step away from the mental health paradigm and get into a paradigm that I feel that my experiences that have been called bipolar have been pointing to. It could be said that is sort of like another dimension or otherworldly in a way. And I was feeling like that it's almost as if that manic world is more real than this reality that we're all in right now, or most of us are in. There could be other people that are here with us, but not really living and experiencing the consensus and mainstream world that we are. And they might not even be able to sense it. They might not be able to sense that anything negative is going on or affecting the people of the world right now. And I do feel that part of the experience of bipolar, at least as I've experienced it, is that I have a sense of that other world where everything, not everything, but things are generally operating on a different algorithm. Different values, different ethics, different morals, different laws of physics, different consciousness where it's not based on division, but it's based on oneness. And I feel like I was there, and I feel like I know I was there. I'm aware of it, and I feel like I know that now I'm back here where I'm sensing the mainstream troubles of the world. And I said to myself quite a while ago now that it seems like we're living in a mass psychosis. And I'm not the only one to say that. I came across a YouTube channel called Academy of Ideas, and they're talking about today's times as a mass psychosis. But I thought it to myself, and I said it to myself long before I discovered that channel and that video. So it was another one of those experiences where it kind of gets confirmed afterwards. Maybe if I said it out loud and my phone heard me, then it's more likely that it will be in the algorithm. And that could be, or in the YouTube feed, the algorithm for my YouTube feed. But that could actually be a benefit of saying something out loud. A lot of people, I don't know what percentage, but a certain amount of people would think that the listening capacity of the phone is a detriment. But it could also be that it is a helpful thing, because if we're saying something out loud to ourselves or to someone else, then that confirmation will show up in our YouTube feed. But then, of course, that can be confirmation bias. And something that I'm looking into and researching for the second book that I'm writing is confirmation bias or cognitive biases in general. And there are a lot of them. And the word bias is a bit biased towards negative, I think. We think of a bias as a negative thing. But of course, it's not all negative, and we have these biases, and there's probably a lot of scientific studies as to why we have these biases in general. Partly to conserve energy and to help us in making decisions faster than if we had to consider all the data separately, or consider it all separately each time we made a decision. Like, imagine we had to do that. We'd have to go back to the beginning of time of human psychological evolution and perceptual evolution in order to figure things out. And that just would take too long. It would take that entire time that it took to get to that place. So it's a time saver to have these cognitive biases. But I'm curious about them in the book that I'm going to be writing, because I feel that some of our biases change. Our cognitive biases, they change in mania or in different parts of the bipolar spectrum or process. And by looking at the biases that have been researched, we can get clues into what's happening for us, in that we can just read about the bias and then extrapolate it to our experiences. So, for example, there's something called the fundamental attribution error. And it says we judge others on their personality or fundamental character, but we judge ourselves on the situation. So if something happens, we'll say that, for another person, we'll say that it's a character flaw. But for us, we'll say, well, it was because of this and because of that in our life situation that happened. It wasn't a character flaw. And that is just one example of a cognitive bias. And then to go with that, there's something called the self-serving bias, where our failures are situational. So again, we just kind of blame the situation, but our successes are because of our personal responsibility. And, in a way, we can say that in mania, our successes are because of mania and the situation of mania, rather than, our personality as we are an ego. Or it could be because of our manic personality. So we can say it's mania as a situation, or mania as like a personality trait or an alter ego in a way. And also there's something called Ingroup favoritism, where we favor who are in our in-group as opposed to an out-group. And for me, when I thought about this one, I was thinking about something that I'm going to be pointing out in all three of the books that I'm writing, is that in a way we need to, as people who go into manic consciousness, get into this idea of in-group favoritism. We need to use it to our advantage and favor the people who are also manic, who, maybe we've met other people in a mental health center or something, but if it's in a mental illness paradigm framework, we just sort of keep this division in place. Whereas if we see that we're in this group of people who sometimes have certain qualities and characteristics, and we can channel those together when we do have them as a sort of in-group, then this in-group favoritism can be used as an advantage. Right now, our in-group favoritism is more about advocating for acceptance of our illness from people on the outside of our group, and also, not being stigmatized. And there's definitely a place for that, but again, for me, that allows us to forget some of the positives. And I think that if we also have an in-group and we favor the positives, there's a lot more that can come about there. And we might be able to anchor in some of those positives as well, instead of anchoring in the negatives and sort of in a state of grief and victimhood. And of course there's a place for that too. There's no problem with that. But there's a lot more that we can do with what we are not as much encouraged to look at, which are the positives. And the bandwagon effect is that it's another cognitive bias, and it's the ideas, fads, and beliefs grow as more people adopt them. And again, that can be seen as not so good. It can be seen as a negative thing. But I do feel that people who experience mania, we do need to create a bandwagon of more people banding together that have that, and being able to capture some of the ideas and beliefs and work them out and integrate them. Because if we're not on a bandwagon together, we're in it separately, and we're like these dots that go up into mania and then we fall out separately. But if we band together, then we can create more of a ripple effect. And I don't know if this is true. It probably has been done in some domains, like in resisting stigma or trying to bring that down. For instance, I see a lot of great people on Instagram advocating in that way. And I started to post funny memes of mania, and some other people I noticed are doing the same. So they might have already been doing that, and I just didn't see until I started doing it, and the algorithm showed me more of what's happening. So, but that's kind of how it works too, right? Like, we all have our own online presence, however small or big, or if we're just sort of using these as information sources, the more that we do certain things online, the more we'll experience that, and that will create a collective effect as well. And there's another cognitive bias, which is groupthink. And so due to a desire for conformity and harmony in the group, we make irrational decisions, often to minimize conflict. Well, I think an example of this could be the decision to focus mainly on defending mental illness and stigma and things like that. It's a type of groupthink, and I think we can equally focus on a groupthink based on the positives that we experience and looking into harvesting those things. So I think that instead of having groupthink in one way, which is encouraged, we can start to group think or think together in another way. And also a false consensus cognitive bias is we believe more people agree with us than is actually the case. And I do think that a lot more people agree with me than I think. So I do think that more people agree with me. But I don't know if that is the case or not, because I haven't really encountered that many people. So I could be totally off base here. You know, when I say things like speaking and focusing mostly on the stigma aspect of mental illness, maybe I'm off base by saying, hey, let's put some of our energy in another direction. And I do think I fall into this curse of knowledge cognitive bias, where once I know something, I think that everyone else does too. And I think that, which kind of contradicts what I said about the false consensus. But I think that most people who have experienced mania already know that maybe the world works in a different way, that maybe there is a different way to live life, that maybe the reality we think is real is not as real as the one that we experience in mania. I do feel that a lot more people know that, because if I've experienced it that way, then maybe others have too. But then after the fact of the lived experience, we're told to experience it or recontextualize our experience in a totally different way. And it's a complete shift in how it might have felt. And so another example of a cognitive bias is the spotlight effect. We overestimate how much people are paying attention to our behavior and appearance. And we probably feel that in mania for sure. Like that one gets amplified. So there's a lot more cognitive biases here, and then some of them shift. So there's one, the status quo bias. We tend to prefer things to stay the same. Changes from the baseline are considered to be a loss. So this is a bias I think that totally changes in mania. We don't necessarily prefer things to stay the same. Mania is a challenge of the status quo at the very core of our being, and it ripples out from there. And so that would naturally change as we go about our day. So that's just an example of some of the things I'm going to be looking into for the second book. And there's a lot more as well. And for example, this one I'm going to talk more about different human potential lenses to go with mania. And some of them include comparing mania to the flow state, as well as looking at it from a purpose base or teleology versus etiology, which is a cause. So most of it focuses from the illness paradigm on the cause and not the purpose of it. So it could be the purpose is healing. It could be the purpose is to find new meaning in life. It could be the purpose is to derail a certain path that we're on so we take another path. Could be the purpose is to save us from a path that would ultimately lead to our demise. But when we just say, oh, it's a mental illness, then we miss out on those types of possibilities. And there's definitely a lot to do with synchronicity in mania. And I find when I'm trying to research stuff or when I'm having ideas into aspects of this, that sometimes I think I miss a big chunk. Like I miss a big chunk about synchronicity. Like most of it is quite synchronistic in mania. At least it was for me. And so it's almost like, how do you talk about air? Like how do you write a chapter on air or water, as it pertains to daily life? It's just sort of like it's the background. It's part of the fundamental nature. So it's hard to tease it out unless you actually live it and breathe it and drink it. So it's a little bit like that for me when I wrote a couple sections in the first book about mania. It's like it's so subjective and it's so unique, I think. Like a lot of the underlying fundamentals and principles are similar, but everyone's experience, as in the details, is unique. But then, yeah, the way it works or the physics of it or the story behind it is there are common themes. And there are common insights and perceptions about the inner workings and the secrets of the universe, which we can distill and obtain just by living fully. And they feel new because before we were sort of living a mechanical life, like a cookie cutter life. When we all of a sudden start living the opposite of the cookie cutter life, like the life that is us and designed for us, then, and created by us, then all of a sudden we can start to ascertain like all these unique bits about reality. And I do feel that it's possible that one day that people won't ever be derailed from that. They'll have that connection to that unique path that they came here to be on from the beginning to the end. And so it won't be like figuring out these secrets of the universe and having them as concepts in mind, especially when we come back to Earth in a way, as we mostly know it. Then we have these thoughts about how things were different and how reality was different and how kind of the laws of physics or the laws of nature, the laws of the universe, the laws of human social interaction were different. But I don't think we would have that juxtaposition if we were continually on that path. And, maybe that sounds a little bit idealistic. And in my experience and in my kind of theorizing, I do have the concept of the adjacent light body, which is the version that is sort of just like one plank length away in terms of vibration from now, or maybe many, but we can kind of, that's the version of ourself that was never moved off the original trajectory. And so the experiences in that trajectory are slightly different. And so I think it's possible in mania that we take a little small quantum leap into that other beingness, and that's why all of a sudden we have all these powers and strengths and talents and gifts that we never had before. Well, we had them, and we would have had them from the very beginning, and they're always there, and we can shift into that, and we do shift into that in mania. And it's a very small jump, but it's a very big jump at the same time. And it's hard to come back. Like, there's a very big resistance to coming back. But one must come back in order to actually be coherent and congruent with the reality that most of us are in. And so that's why it's hard, again, to talk about synchronicity and mania. And it's more interesting to talk about the fundamental principles or the underlying patterns, as well as how they relate to some of these patterns they've observed in the front lines of science, as well as human potential. And so, I also talk about mania and bipolar, comparing it to embodied cognition. And if you wonder what that is, it's popularized by the work of Amy Cuddy and the power poses. And it goes much beyond that in mania. And, power posing is kind of like preschool, and mania is like you're in Mensa and you have 5 PhDs, but without ever having them. So that's sort of how, the society we live in, it's already proven that it dumbs us down. It deprives us of oxygen. It deprives us of so many things, and because of that, we're kind of all in a suppressed and oppressed state. And if that wouldn't have happened, quote, we'd be somewhere else altogether. And so I also talk about comparing it to Dr. Nuremberg's work around being a hero, right? Like everyday hero. And he's the one that did the Stanford prison experiments. I'm also extrapolating it to the Selfserving prophecy and sort of like selective attention and the salience networks in the brain, as well as near-death experiences. So, and more. There's a lot more to do with that, and it's kind of just like a fun game to write about it. It's not meant to be proven. It's sort of like, okay, I saw this other reality with my own eyes, and now I have certain thoughts about it, and lo and behold, a lot of what other people are saying who may or may not have touched this other reality, but they're deducing it from their experiments and things that they're doing, completely correlate with mania. And so I feel like if we can do that, all of a sudden we can get a huge upgrade in our software download of reality. And then when we join together, and the thing is, I'm pretty sure we don't even have to join together physically in terms of being in the same room or even being aware of each other's existence per se. It's something that we can do silently, and that's the beauty of it. Because otherwise it wouldn't work, right? Like, it wouldn't work to change human consciousness through the ways that we try to change it right now. And it would probably happen pretty quick. Just like with an individual mania. Like, right now we're in a collective psychosis. We need a collective mania. That's really what we need. And I think that with what's happening right now in the world, it's to make us be against each other, right? And that's not going to work. And so that's why I feel like if there's a small group of us who kind of know how these other principles work, and we put them to use and we put them to work, not even by trying. Like, it doesn't work by trying, right? It doesn't work by trying. Anything that we try is within the realm of what we've already tried. So we have to not try and try to not try. And I think, I really do think that what I felt, and maybe what you felt in mania, that there's some kind of mission behind this, is true. And I think it's visible more now than ever. It's really obvious. And if you go through all the dialogues I ever had with myself, and if I did, I know I've said more than once that there'll be a point where the world gets divided, and there'll be sort of like a sort of higher vibe and a lower vibe. And I just felt like that was true. And I actually felt like I went into the higher vibe in mania already, and it kind of was already always divided. But the people and the beings in the higher realm that I went into briefly, or relatively briefly, they're always just kind of chilling, gracefully, humbly waiting for us to catch on, right? They can't try to convince us. They never tried to convince me. I could tell that they saw me and they interacted with me and everything, but they didn't try to convince me of anything. So I'm not trying to convince anyone as well, but I do feel it's time to be a bit of a bridge, It's time to be a bit of a bridge, and bridging with language. And language is the focus of the third book that I am writing. And that one's going to take a little bit longer, but there are definitely some really interesting points worth pondering. And again, it's about reframing and recontextualizing what we experienced, what we were told our experiences meant, and what they could actually mean. And then if they actually mean something else, which could be something that I've said or something that you've thought, and if I say something that you've thought or close to it, it gives your brain permission just to relax into that which you already know and you already experienced for yourself. And then there's no effort, right? So from that, I don't know. Again, it is World Suicide Prevention Day, and it's really hard to believe that one of my loved ones went away, because I thought it would be me. I thought I would be taken away by some kind of force that was just pulling me, but it hasn't happened yet, and I don't want it to happen. So I just really hope that if you need help, reach out for the help that's available now. It's not the best help, but it's the main help that we have, and it's better than nothing. Sometimes it can feel like it's worse than nothing. I've been there. But getting through that suffering is really, if you get through it, when you get through it, I'm not going to say if, but when you get through it, you've really done the world a favor by processing that and feeling all of that with every fiber of your body. And it really, once you've experienced it like that, it takes some of it away from the world, you know. Like if I'm suffering that much or you are, it means that somebody else isn't. And you know, that could be like a really weird belief or something, but from my experiences, I've had many experiences that have shown that to me directly to be true. That I can even tell myself, you know, I'm processing this for me, for somebody else. Maybe I don't even know who they are. And because I'm feeling a disproportionate amount of pain to anything that's happening in this moment now. So it's related to some other moment, right? Some other moment that wasn't processed. And so it's important just to, you know, keep the body safe and seek help, and don't let that suffering trick you into ending the body before the suffering ends. And because it will end. There is a mercy, there is a grace, and I don't think it's religious. I think it's scientific. It's quantum physical. And so you can do it. Just stay on this journey and stay on earth. You come back from the high states to the low states in order to share a message. And there is some kind of mission, and we all feel it, right? If we all feel it, those of us who go into hypermania, does that mean it's a sign of illness, or does it mean it's a sign that there is some kind of mission, there is some kind of message? We just need to figure it out. It's a big job to figure out the mission of the universe, or one of them, right? Because there's many missions in many different movements and many different organizations. Why can't people who experience mania have a mission of some kind together that has different elements and facets? Many people form organizations, and I'm not saying we need an organization, but many people form organizations and movements around something they experienced. So why can't we? We fall into a vulnerable state, and often a depression or a psychosis or both. And so that vulnerable state is time to heal, but doesn't mean to forget about the mission. Like, it just means we need to rest and heal and ponder and figure out what it is. That's how I feel. And it doesn't even have to be a big rah-rah thing. Like, it can be a personal thing where we're figuring out our experiences and recontextualizing them and talking to ourselves about them and writing about them with ourselves and seeing what else the universe gives us to process and to look at with our gaze. You know, when we're looking with that gaze, and it's not through the ego process, we are directly looking as the universe. And that is a feedback that changes the algorithm of the universe. So it's very important that we process this stuff. You know, maybe sometimes we write down something in a bit of a frenzy, like channeling, and we never look at it again. Well, we have to look at it, because the universe doesn't even know what it wrote down until we look at it. And we don't either. And then we realize that we are the universe. So many, many layers there. I hope there was something for you. lots and lots of stuff coming out, and I will be starting up a bit of a mailing list for more. So until the next time we speak, stay safe, stay positive, and explore your human potential.